Welcome back to another ground up SCX24 build, and today we are going to be putting this onto that. Well, that's not that exciting. Those are just stock rails. Well, this is the WTMicro FJ45-XL resin printed body. So I've got it painted up and detailed. I put in a little bit of work there. It does come raw resin, but this is set up in the kit for the stock rails. So we're going to go ahead and use some since I've got some on hand. So it's got the nice long boat sliders here. It's got a front single magnet mount that interfaces with the body posts. So you get these two little screws here that you can glue into the body posts. You get, of course, the kit here with the roof, the grille, the lenses, the rear bed panel, and then the last item is the rear magnet mount. And this is pretty nice. It's slotted there, you can see on the sides. So it actually interfaces with these C-channel frame rails, screws into the rear where the hinge would typically. But a pretty nice little kit here, very well set up for the stock rails. So we're gonna go ahead and take advantage of those. So let's go ahead and dive in. I figure the first thing we jump into is the paint and body work and kind of the theme of this build. But like I said earlier, these do come in raw resin, so this is what you're going to get right out of the box here. Very nice print quality. I haven't ever done any finish work to the exterior of the body. I've just done a little sanding to clean up some of the little resin riser bumps on the bottom edges and the bottom edges of the window, but other than that, these things are basically flawless. Just great little prints here. So moving on to the actual FJ here. So this paint job is inspired by a couple of my trips to Australia. So while I was down there, I saw quite a few trucks and utes that were, I guess, more of a work truck. So they had the standard painted to match kind of stock bed removed, and they would have an all aluminum, either kind of flatbed setup or, you know, a short bed kind of like this. And a lot of times they would have actually a cage that went over the top to hold ladders or equipment. But all in aluminum. So just a very cool look. You had the painted body and then you had the aluminum back to it. So you've got almost a cab only look with that. So that's what the paint job is inspired by. So speaking of that, let's go through a little photo montage of the paint and detailing process and catch you up on that, and then we'll move on. Okay, it is time to spice up this boring stock chassis. So you can see I've got a lot of things laid out here on the table. All of these are going to tune this a little more to an LCG type chassis setup. So we've got the stock front tray set up here. So everyone's familiar with this. You get one shock position, and then you get a flat ESC tray, and then of course your body mount posts. Pretty basic, not a lot of options. So this is an alternative from Bauhaus. So this gives you two shock mount options. It's a little bit better, and it gives you a sloped ESC or battery tray to kind of lower the CG a little bit. Then we've got the LCG V2 set from Grizzlyworks RC. So this front tray is pretty nice. It's got a recess for your servo cord, so you can run that under kind of an ESC if you've got kind of the stock combo there, or if you're running a battery. It's got some little slots on the side as well as the bottom for battery straps, so that's convenient. It's got a cross brace built in that may or may not be good depending on the servo clearance, but it's got a ton of shock tower options there. And then you can see it has a nice sloped ESC or battery position there for the tray. So that's nice. It's definitely a little bulkier, a little thicker. It is a resin print. Then this is the rear version that goes with that. So again, it's got a cross brace that may or may not be in the way of like a thicker battery, but it gives you a ton of rear shock mount options, and it gives you the battery tray that is recessed and it slots in the frame rails, and then it cuts out for the motor because it's lowering this, so it gives you a little more brush motor clearance there. But because this is a Gladiator extended frame, we're getting the newer style battery tray that is already dropped, and it's in the C channels of the frame. So it's basically sitting at the same height that this LCG tray is. So I don't think I'm going to use this guy. It's bigger, it's bulkier, and I just think I'm going to save it potentially for something else. This as well. I don't think this gives me enough shock mounting options to really do anything positive. So these guys are out of the way, but I kind of wanted to go over the typical options. And this is something new that I found on eBay. So these are 3D printed. So the front is 3-piece here, so your tray screws in to each side. But let's take a look at this. Look at how many shock options, and they just arch and follow the frame point. So tons of these. I think they go further back maybe they do than this if you align the body posts. So you can really lean those shocks back and get some great travel and lower your center of gravity. So these look like they're going to do the trick here. On the front, this tray will be easy to cut if I need to modify, since it is a separate little piece, and that'll be dependent kind of on the motor. And then the rear I really like as well. They are slotted to fit in the C-channel rail, similar to the WTMicro rear magnet mount piece, but then they've got a ton of shock mount options again that go forward of the body mount position. So again, that should help lower the center of gravity, give me better shock positioning to get better articulation. So this is kind of the approach we're going to take on the frame, kind of a homemade LCG, if you will. And then the thing in the back here, I've got a brand new Mofo RC aluminum transmission skid. So maybe we can build up kind of a little shell of a frame here and then see what's next. Okay, we have ourselves a skeleton of a frame here. So it went together fairly easy. I did have to take a Dremel and flatten kind of the back sides of these posts to give them a little fitment room there to this back magnet piece. But you can see those fit on there nicely. Nice low pro battery tray. And then the front went on pretty easily. I did have to take out a little width on each side of this tray just to get this to sit in flush. It was kind of wanting to push it apart. And this guy actually screwed in and threaded in very tightly, so no glue on this guy. So I think we're good to go here. I'm imagining we're going to do some modification to this down the road. Most likely going to chop off the front extensions of the frame because there's no bumper on this, and those will just get in the way of the servo. And then this tray may have to come out, or we may have to modify it somewhat for the motor, but we're not going to get into that just yet. I think we're going to get a few more pieces together before we look at motor selection, so let's move on. All right, next up are the axles, so I'll run through the parts and pieces real quick. So for the rear, we're going to be using a stock assembly. Going to be adding a little weight to that with the Mazz Designs diff cover, and then we're going to use the ramp crab adjustable link riser for that axle. So that's the rear. And then for the front, I'm trying out something new. This is Poor Boys RC brass axle housing. So I'm going to try this guy out. So of course I'm going to need bearings for this, some gears. So I've got some 212 overdrive from Mazz, and then I've got some Mofo V2 CVDs for the axles in this guy, some brass knuckles from Mofo, and then his brass best servo mount ever. So that will be the front assembly. So without further delay, I'm going to get these guys together. Thought I'd share a quick tip here as I'm getting into this Poor Boys RC brass axle housing. So both of the bearings for the diff cover and actually the inner diff here would not seat. So just a good trick to take off a little of the black coating is just to roll up some sandpaper, spin it around in there, and that'll do it. And as you can see, that was just enough to drop this one in, but super easy to do. Just make sure you blow out all the dust before you grease it up. But just thought I'd share that little tip there. That happens pretty often. Okay, another quick assembly tip here as I'm going through this axle housing. So you can see I've got all my O-rings out here. So these are the size that come with the overdrive gears from Mazz Designs. So these are huge. They're more like shock O-rings. That's what you typically get on the worm gear. So just remember, you don't have to use both of those. They are just shims. So I only have one installed of the Mazz, and they're so thick there's no front to back movement at all. So you don't have to use everything that comes with the kit. The other thing is the servo tray does not want to fit over the I guess the middle ear here on the diff, and that's a pretty common issue as well. I never know if it's the axle housing manufacturer or the servo tray to blame, but little Dremel cutoff wheel, running it down each side of that slot will sand off a little of that coating, and this should drop right on there. So just something to look out for. That's why it's good to take your time, do a little test fitting before you actually start greasing everything and trying to screw everything together. But really easy to identify these little things like that. So I'm going to get this taken care of, and then we'll get this axle wrapped up, hopefully. Moving right along, got these axles finished up and greased with a little Cow RC udder butter. You can see I've got some stock drive shafts out here. Went ahead and got these on the axles so I could make sure they were nice and smooth, and they are. It's exactly what you want. Nice floppy knuckles, no binding here. And man, a lot of good weight here already on this front axle. This has got their little Poor Boys logo with the dude pulling out his pockets. Pretty funny looking. But the only other note on assembly was I did have to chase out the bearing races on each end of the axle to get the bearings to seat, to get the axles to fully plug into the gear. But other than that, the fit and finish is very nice on that, but you definitely are going to have to do a little bit of sanding work to get your bearings to fit. And then of course the servo tray fitment, that may be dependent on the tray, it may be the axle, I'm not sure. But we're basically done here with the axle components, although I am missing a few items from the front. So I've got those here. We've got Mazz Designs stainless steel link set. So that does come with steering links, so that'll go on the front to complete that. And then for the big omission here, I've got something brand new for you. Let me get everything out of the way. Boom. We've got the new blue limited edition Nsdrc RS100 micro servo. So I've used these before in silver and red and purple, but never in blue. So I thought this would work really well with the blue cab. This thing just has incredible specs. You can see that 197 ounce inches at 8.4 volts, just massive torque. But that will round out the axle. So I'm going to go ahead and get those links assembled and get this servo installed, and then I think we're going to focus on the midsection. Back with a little more progress. Got this front axle wrapped up here, got the servo mounted, and wow, looks really good. That matching servo horn with a little anodized edge. Very nice. One thing I did not mention, when I typically mount these servos to the adjustable servo mounts, I leave the bottom two screws on each side loose for these posts until I get the longer screw tightened down on each side for the actual servo. Make sure that's all squared up. Then I just take the whole mount off the diff, come back and cinch up these 4 screws underneath, and then reinstall it. And then you should be able to remove and reinstall that servo on the posts, no problem, and everything will be squared up. But just a good way to do that. Make sure there's no issues there. And then for the links, you can see I unthreaded each side maybe 3 turns, but that was to basically kick this out and square it up straight and maybe give me just a hair bit of toe out. You will need a pretty long screw over here at this knuckle, maybe a 14 or a 16. And then the last thing, you use the straight with the hex rod ends for this steering link, and you use one up here at the servo horn. And then you can see I've got a bent with a hex around rod end here. So two different types for this front assembly, but pretty easy. And then for the rest of the Mazz links, it's not much harder. You've got a third head style, which has a smooth surround, but it is bent. So you use that down at the skid plate, and then you'll use the bent style with the hex for your other end at the axle, and then your uppers, I think, just have the bent with the hex. But you can see how that sets up the link going in the right direction. It takes into account all that built-in misalignment in the joint, and it basically takes out all that preload and stress on the joint bending at the actual rod end instead. So it's a very nice design. You just need to pay attention and make sure, of course, that you mirror your setup, but not too hard at all. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the rest of these built up, and we'll go from there. All right, got all these links assembled, and I went ahead and I hung the uppers on the chassis because the sliders actually cover the mount point. And in doing that, I realized the little pockets for the hardware head for those upper links was too small on these sliders. So I took a little drill bit and enlarged those just a hair. And you can see those now sit nice and flush on the rail and cover those. And then as I did that, I realized we haven't fit a motor, so I stopped on hanging links because we may have to flip the transmission backwards. So I think that's as far as we're going to go right there until we get a motor in. So I went ahead and started thinking about a mock-up and stacked some magnets in, and I got this one actually stuck in there. So took a bunch of magnets and I could not pull it out. So may just wait until you're ready to glue that before you actually push it all the way in there. It's a tight fit, but as long as it stays in there, it won't matter. And if it comes out, I can glue it. So I think the next thing we're gonna look at is motor and transmission. Time for the midsection. So you can see I've got a stock axial plastic transmission housing ready to go. And then I'll be using this Furitek Mini Komodo 2000 kV. So this little guy, I've tried on a couple of builds to actually fit this in, and I've been unsuccessful. So I'm super excited to get this in a build and actually run it. And I've also got Furitek's little aluminum and carbon fiber motor mount that this requires as well. So I think that's the next step here, is to get this assembled. And here we are. So like I say, because I've tried and failed on a few builds fitting this in, I've actually got the assembly ready to go. It's tested, it's meshed up, and all we need to do is a little experimentation. So because this sits a little different than a cheat code chassis, I'm hoping I've got the height to actually fit this in the forward position. Now, of course, I'll have to remove that tray or modify it, but the hope is it'll be low enough that that motor will be under the bottom of the hood there. So that's been the problem in the past. If not, I can always flip this around backwards and flip this transmission skid. Of course, I've got plenty of space with an XL cab here, so that's the nice thing. Probably not going to run a battery here, so I can cut away this or remove it totally if I need to. But I think that's the next step here, is I'll do a little fitment and experimentation and see where we land on this transmission skid. Well, look at that. I finally got this motor installed in a build, and I was able to do it forward facing. So I did enough test fitting to be confident that it would work. So I went ahead and modified the front tray for that motor clearance, as you can see. So that was super easy to do. Just basically scribed there around the can, so that's nice. The extension here on this bracket was in the way of the motor mount, so that got chopped off there nice and flush. So I went ahead and matched it on this side, but they end up being a nice kind of side motor guard protecting that can, so that worked out well. So pretty easy there, and I went ahead and glued in my magnets all the way around. So I've got them double stacked with the body side magnet there so I can get a proper mock-up. And I went ahead and glued in the bed as well, because that's going to have to be supported back here. So with this mocked in here, those are slid back all the way. So you can see the top of that motor. There's probably 3 or 4 millimeters at least to the underside of that hood. So no problem there. So that is the difference between a flat skid that raises all of that up and this stock transmission skid that keeps it lower down. So very happy about that. Got the weight forward for the bias, so that's definitely the way I want to run this motor. So really we're only lacking shocks here to be able to get the axles hung. So I've got these Hot Racing long travel oil shocks filled and ready to go. So I think that's the next thing, is to get the axles on here, and then I can start looking at the front end geometry with the grill and where I want to potentially chop these frame rails off. But so far so good. Very happy to get this motor finally in a build. So as I was getting these links on and getting ready to hang this front axle, I remembered some little issues I went through on this prior build that is very similar here on the 4-door. So on this one, I remembered that I ended up moving the servo to the middle mount, and it's usually on the back for these builds, and that was for a little bit better tray clearance, as you can see right there. And on this one, I kept the linkage on the front, and I think that was just barely clearing the grill. And I believe that was because I could not fit it and clear the diff cover with this setup. But in adjusting this front axle to the middle position here, or the servo, you can see I was able to mount it behind the servo horn as typical, and there's just like a piece of paper's worth of width there to that thickened diff cover, so it does not hit it or scratch it. So that is perfect. And then I took out a couple of turns here to lengthen that, trying to get that centered up. When the servo horn is straight down, the steering would be centered right there. So just a little bit of length added to that drag length, but just something to know, a little tweak. This looks like this will give me plenty of clearance now to the front grille, which is usually the problem on these guys. So anyways, little update there. So I think I'm going to go ahead and probably chop this frame before I get this in. I kind of test fit it, and you know, the frame hits these tabs right off the bat, so I don't even think I'm going to mess with trying to hang it with these on here. I'm going to figure out a point where I want to cut these. But anyways, that's the update here, so slowly but surely. All right, we have a little bit of forward progress here. So I've got the front end mocked in, and I think I'm going to make a few adjustments here. So this is how far that servo can get up into the frame. So I'd like to maybe get this sitting a little lower, and you can see I could always roll the shocks back to get lower. The problem is the servo cord right now is hitting kind of the angled portion of that tray support. So that's the stop. And also this frame extension right here is, I think, going to have to come off. It's still able to catch that cord that exits the side and just kind of barely touch it right up the middle. So I think there's going to be a little more Dremel work there for clearancing, and then I can roll this shock back and potentially get this servo up a little bit higher. So there's my kind of fully compressed caster. So sliders are basically level, so not a ton. So I'm thinking I can unthread these guys a few turns on the lowers, kick the axle out. So let's do a quick mock up here with the body. Flip it over, lay it in here. Let me fully compress the front so you can see the clearance there. So really lengthening those lowers would really just kick the bottom out and tuck the back of the servo down. So that should work, and it should give me some better caster, which will help the turning a little bit. So anyways, I think there's a little bit of disassembly and adjustment ahead, a little more Dremel work, but that's the update. Okay, back with some real forward progress. So I've got a complete slider together after a little bit of fitment work. So as you saw, I made my initial cut to the front end, and I did that pretty much flush with these posts. And of course that was not enough. Had to come back and clean it up even further, take some off of the mounting position for the actual tray, and then I had to basically flush the frame out with that. And that in combination with quite a bit of link adjustment on the front end. As you can see, I took these lowers probably 2.5 turns on each end, about as far as I was comfortable unthreading these. And then I unthreaded the tops there, as you can see, maybe 2 turns on one end. So that moved the servo forward a little bit for the top edge as far as hitting the actual tray across there. And it also helped a little bit with this cord clearance coming out and hitting this mount point. And then of course the lowers really helped kick the servo back. So they kicked that forward, kicked it back, and man, that's really good geometry now. Really good caster, happy with that. So when it's fully squatted, we are almost touching the magnet mount. So really low. The back can get a little bit lower. I ended up implementing some flex blades, as you can see on the rear. These are Mofo RC aluminum. So these, you know, I could tighten these down and they would not pivot, but I think I'm going to leave them pivoting and put myself in a center limiting strap from maybe this mount point down to the top of that link riser. That way I still get a little benefit of articulation, but it keeps it from dropping out on me, or it keeps the body from lifting up unexpectedly on a descent. But so far so good, very happy with it. And in doing all of this, I went ahead and glued in the body side magnets. So let's go ahead and do a quick test fit. So it drops right on there. So let's cue this up and get it down to full compression. Look at that. So there's just a hair of room. Let's kick it all the way over. No problem. Kick it all the way back. Look at that. Could always get a shorter screw or cut that off if I need to, but doesn't look like I'm going to need to. So that is how we're sitting, nice and low, almost as low as a cheat code. Of course, I can get the back a little bit lower, and I think I'm all right with that. But wait till I get this thing fully loaded down with the battery and the electronics, and then I'll adjust the collars on the shock to get it sitting level, get it sitting low how I need it. But anyways, I think we're pretty much set up here on the suspension. The one thing I forgot to mention, I'll get the stand out of the way, is in lengthening this front end, it really affected the drive shaft. So you can see there's just a lot exposed. Not much left as far as engagement there, so that's a really, really floppy joint. So I've got a longer drive shaft, and I've got this little K&S pipe cutter tool. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this down to the length I need and swap it in. And I think after that, we'll be done with suspension. All right, I think I've got the last of the suspension tweaks wrapped up here. So as you can see, I've got the front drive shaft cut down. So at full compression here, I've still got a little bit of room, and at full extension, I've got plenty of engagement, and there's no more slop in that joint. So that is exactly what you want there. The other thing I did was add limiting straps to the front shocks, and that does not at all hold the axle back from articulating, even though there's a strap on each side. There's so much weight here What it will do is keep that nose from wanting to unload and lift up on a climb. So you can see it's tucking that down basically at full squat there. So don't think I could get any lower here to that mount. And then you can see I did slip a magnet under here just for a little more holding power on that nose, since there's just one magnet. That's a trick I used on my 4-door FJ. So I think the front end is basically next to perfect right there. So for the rear, I added a center limiting rubber band here. So that goes from the mount down to the link riser. So that being on the center allows full pivot here. Of course, I don't have the weight of the wheels, so I kind of have to pull it down, but it, it doesn't limit from the sides at all. So that's a great way to do it there at the center. And the main reason I did that was so I wouldn't have this axle dropping out on a descent and have the back end just surprisingly unload on me. But I still get the usage of the flex blades on a full twist kind of articulation. But it also, of course, pulls the ride height down. So you can see here I'm sitting super low now. Let me pop the body on. So nice and basically full squatted there. So I think now with that all set up, we are ready to start looking at electronics. And it looks like we've got plenty of space in there to work with. So let's get out the electronics, see what we're going to use, and I'll get those installed. Okay, back with a full table here. I've got an example build out, but we'll get to that in a second. So let's run through the electronics I'll be using. So since this is a Furitek motor I'll be using, I'm going to pair that with a Furitek ESC. So I've got the Lizard Pro with the optional Bluetooth dongle. So that makes it super easy to make little adjustments on your smartphone. And to bump up the BEC on this guy, which I believe maxes out at 6.5 volts at 2.5 amps. I'm going to use this external from Nsdrc that'll push it up to 8.4 at 3 amps, I believe. So a nice little bump up for power and speed for the servo. And then since I'm setting this up for my FlySky GT5 transmitter, I'll be using this little micro FS2A 4-channel receiver. So this comes in a couple of pieces, so you do have to solder it together, which I've already done here. And then for the batteries, you can see I've got a couple of options here from Galaxy. They're both 3S. The bottom one's a little bit larger, it's a 300. The top is a 250 milliamp hour. So let's take a quick look at this example build. It is very similar here. It's got the long boat sliders. I'm using the Furitek Ultimate ESC, so I don't have an outboard BEC on this one. But I'm using the same little micro receiver here. And then because of this nanoband being in the transfer gear standard mount, I had plenty of space on this boat slider. Nothing in this cavity at all. This tray sits in from the frame, you can see there. So I was able to fit that 300 milliamp hour battery way forward there on the slider. So a really good placement there. So I'm hoping to do something similar with this guy because it's got all that room as well. So I can get that back on the stand. So these sliders are a little bit shorter, but I'm still gonna have plenty of space, I believe. Still got the tray up front for something, and I test fit the 300 up front, and it will not fit because of the width of this motor mount. So I believe I'm gonna Velcro the whole slider. It looked like the 250 would fit up front, the 300 would fit in this zone right here, which is not too far back. So it looks like that'll give me some options, and then I'll just brainstorm the rest of it and kind of see if I'm gonna make any tweaks to the layout versus this guy because of this BEC. But I think before I get into the actual install, I'm gonna get the rest of this stuff unpackaged, plugged up, and we can do a quick motor test, and I can go ahead and set up that servo. We are ready for a little motor test, a little servo test. So as you can see here, I've got my thread locker out. This is the time. Once I've got everything final adjusted, I go ahead and put thread locker on my key points here at the servo and the steering. Usually don't want to do that as I'm working on it, just in case I've got to be taking it on and off, but I think now we're finalized. So I went ahead and got the servo adjusted to max out these CVDs. And what I do is visually look at them with the vehicle off and see what my throw is going to be kind of maxed out. So that's what I'm going for as I'm adjusting. And this one I ended up having to kind of split the difference with the dual rate. I think this is up around 80 something with this side turned up to about 115 on the endpoint and this one backed off on the endpoint, maybe down to the 80 something. But that seemed to give me the perfect throw here. So I'm happy with that. And as I do that in my final adjustments, I usually have a little bit of throttle just to make sure there's no bucking at the, the full turn here. So just a good little tip there is kind of go a little bit at a time, go slow, make sure you don't bend anything because it's super easy to do that. But I think now we are ready to plug this up and give it a little bit of a test here. So let me get this plugged in. Get this guy turned on. Get this turned on. How about we zoom in just a tad here. So I don't have that 8.4 BEC wired in, so we are just up at 6.5, but really fast already. So let's spin up this motor. So just super quiet. Super smooth. I'm a lot smoother on the acceleration than the letting off the acceleration. Just so quiet with the plastic gears and the transmission. Look at that, no torque twist. That jump is just the drag brake when I let off. But there's no jump on the throttle. That's really nice. So everything looks to be functioning in tip-top condition here. So gonna get everything in its final home, get that BEC wired in, and we'll take a look at it. Back with the electronics installed, and that went in fairly easy. Give you a little top view here. So plenty of space in there as I was expecting. So this turned out a little different as far as layout than my other one. So I ended up with the BEC up here on the tray, since that's nice and low profile, keeping everything lower than the motor there. And then to counter the battery weight over here, I did all of the electronics on this slider, but since I was sharing the power connection with the BEC, I put the ESC up front close to that, which gets my on-off switch right here, so easy access to reach up in there with the body on. And then because of that, I slid the receiver back here to the rear, but fairly similar to that prior build as far as layout. And then my favorite mount point has got to be the Bluetooth dongle right in there to the side of the transmission. So that's nice and hidden. And you can see I've got my coiled up slack here for my LEDs on the cab side. So speaking of LEDs, when I was getting my headlight lenses glued into the grill here, I was getting out everything, getting ready to solder, and I noticed a little mistake here on the quantity. So I accidentally only ordered one of these. So of course you can't make a set of headlights out of one. And since these are a unique color, being the ice blue, I had to go ahead and order my extra. So going to be a few days out on any headlights for this guy, but you know what that means. There's only one thing left to do besides glue the roof on, and that would be to fill in these fender wells. So I think the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and jump into wheels and tires, take a look at some options, and then we'll get back to headlights when those arrive. Time for the stars of the show here. So look at these beautiful deep dish wheels. In addition to using this poor boy's RC brass axle, I'm trying out their wheels as well. So as you can see, no frills packaging, no label. You get a super sweet raw aluminum deep dish wheel here. I want to say these in aluminum weigh in maybe in the 30-gram range. I'll put that on the screen. But pretty nice looking rim. They give you a little bit, probably negative offset. Looks like the outer face is maybe a little deeper. But these measure out to about 20 millimeters wide. So super wide wheel, nice deep dish look. Simple 3-piece design with 4 screws. What was odd is between just the 2 wheels I got out to test fit, some of the tool tips were 1.5 and some of them were 050. The hardware and the thread is the same. You know, the screws look the same. It's just the tool tip head was different. So very odd that something different got mixed in, but not a big deal. But you just have to have 2 different sizes to install these wheels. So you can see I also picked up some brass rings that they offer. I think these guys alone weigh 30 grams, so they should add significant weight to these wheels, which will be nice to help lower that center of gravity even more. So what I've got planned for these are some Nsdrc tires that I have not used. These are their fairly new Mi-Claw clones. These are their Swamp Claws, and this is the smaller version. I believe this is a 56 by 23. Yes, so pretty wide tire. Should look really wide and mean on these deep dish rims. So I've done a little test fitting, and it looks like we're going to clear the bed and we're going to clear the fender and shock on full twist, full lock. So I'm going to get these mounted up and we'll see what they look like. And then of course, we've got some alternate sets to look at. Wow, look at that thing. Just super aggressive look here. Those meaty tires. Wow, and look at those deep dish wheels. Just looks so good. And that bed is basically color matched to these wheels. I don't think I could have done a better paint selection than I did here. These almost look like they were painted together. So that just looks super killer. Let's square this up here and let's take a look at some tire clearances. So on the front, if we go full lock here, we've still got just a tad bit of clearance. The same here at the nose. We are just missing it. So if we go full twist, we're just kissing it. And I believe the same at full lock this way. We are just kissing the fender. Just barely touching the shock at the very top, but I think we'll be able to roll through that, no problem. And then the rear, it's always the bed clearance here on the sides, so let's check this out. I have to lean this up a little, but we are nice and clear there at the edge. So one thing I did when installing these wheels and tires to get a little more wiggle room there for the clearance is I installed +1 brass hexes all the way around on these. And a lot of times in the past I've used Samix +1 brass hexes that are, I guess, 4 millimeters. But now Little Guy Racing actually has 4 millimeter hexes and 5 millimeter hexes. So they have a +1 and a +2 option. So when you're tuning and you just need a little more width, those are a great option. So those allowed me to get that last little bit of clearance for these tires. So I think now with these nice meaty kind of weekend wheeling tires set up on here, I think it's time to maybe look at more of a work truck tire and wheel combo for this guy. See if we can't change the entire look of it. But I gotta say, I'm very happy with this look right here. All right, time to set this FJ up with more of a work truck vibe. And for that, I've got some classic stamped Steelies here in white. So these are from OGRC. They're not the deep dish outer face. So they've got a little inset to them, but they do have the removable hub. So you can flip that for more of a negative offset and you get a really deep dish outer face. Of course, these come with a brass ring that's vented. So I think those have a really nice look to them. I think those will go really well with the roof and the grille. And then you can see behind it there, I've got 3 brass rings. So the one on the right is actually the one that comes on the wheel. So this is 13 grams. Then they offer a set of mid-weight tuning rings at 15 grams a piece and a heavyweight set at 24 grams a piece. So because these poor boys RC wheels weigh in at 40 grams, I believe, with the heavyweights, I'll be using these heavyweights. And swapping those in, I should end up with a 33 gram wheel when it's all said and done. So pretty comparable to what's on there now. Shouldn't throw off the tuning when I switch the wheels and tires. And speaking of tires, since I'm going more scale with this, I picked up these brand new licensed Mickey Thompson Baja MTZs. So these are from RC 4-wheel drive, obviously, and they're in the nice sticky X2 S3 compound, which is super gummy, super soft. Got a really nice scale tread pattern. I've actually got one mounted up here, done a little test fitting, and I think these look really good. You can see I opted for the deep dish setup here with more of a negative offset to match what's on the truck now. And because these are a little taller, I believe these come in around 57. I definitely want to kick these out from the truck to get the clearance I'll need. But I think these are going to look really nice. They're very soft and supple on that vented ring. And these have a full uncut soft foam in them right now, and they're still that pliable. So these would work well on an unvented setup with these foams as well, I think. But I think that's probably why they give you a stiffer foam stock. But I just wanted something a little wider to kind of push these tires out a little more, give them a little wider look on these wheels. But so far so good. So I think I've got 3 more wheels to swap in that heavy brass ring, get these mounted up. I'll put some medium uncuts in the rear, and we'll see what this thing looks like with some white wheels. I'm midway into mounting these up, and I may have struck gold here. You tell me what you think. Look at that. That may be the new look. Color match to the front, color match to the rear, mismatched overall, but that looks pretty sick right there, I think. Wow. Starting a new trend? You tell me. Anyways, back to the task at hand. Well, I may have done it again. I am absolutely torn between the look of this set and the other as far as which one is my favorite. I mean, that white on the light blue, you just can't get any better than that. That just looks super classic, man. And of course, the scale hubs I had did not fit, so you can see I swapped in some Nsdrc, which are much smaller. But I think those look really good. Wow, let's take a look from the side here. Nice profile shot. That looks killer. Let's check the clearances here. So we've got wiggle here at full lock. We've got clearance at full lock. So let's check the twist here. So we're probably going to get into this just a hair, just a tread maybe. Let's flip it around so it looks like just touching the shock and definitely getting into that fender. But luckily this isn't a super knobby tread. This is very soft tire, so hopefully we'll be able to turn through that little bit there. And we'll check the back, which we ought to be good just based on the width of these tires. Yeah, we've got plenty of space compared to that other set. So it looks like these are going to work out just fine. And I think these might be a good candidate for putting the mediums in the front and the firms in the rear, because the mediums are still have a lot of flex. They definitely have some more support, which will be nice when all that weight transfers back onto them. So anyways, I think that completes this second setup here. But because we are delayed here on the headlights, I think I'm going to take you into another wildcard phase here. Wildcard time. Actually, it's wildcard to a wildcard to a wildcard. So first off, the wheels are a double wildcard, so I wasn't able to use the deep dish that I had planned. I mean, I could have used them, I guess, but they had a polished lip, and I couldn't wrap my head around that against the kind of machine finished aluminum bed. So I ended up looking through the other wheels I had. Black just wasn't doing it for me. So I found these gray NHX wheels I've had for quite some time, and the gray just looks stellar against that blue. And you'll notice here that dash around the lip is actually just a machine finished piece. So that actually matches the bed very nice. And so there's no polished on this, it's just a gray and that machine finish. So I think that'll work, but since these are so shallow, they definitely have a 0 or even a positive offset to them. So they're gonna sit a lot further in the truck. They're much narrower, as you can see, and they're quite a bit lighter as well. They're 22 grams with these brass rings. So definitely a little bit different setup here. So with that different offset, that's gonna push me to a smaller diameter tire. So that's my second wild card. So originally I had some Patagonias planned for this, but they were a little wide, a little bit taller than these. So I know I just used these BFG KM3s, but they're just such a nice scale tread. Great compound, that same X2 S3 compound. And these clock in at just over 50 millimeters, I believe. So they fit the bill perfectly as far as fitment, so I'm going to use them again. And of course, we're going to be swapping in some Lil Nova foams, a half of one to each tire. So I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of these mounted up, and we'll see what this wildcard set does to the truck. Okay, wildcards in action here. And I've got to say, I think I like these a lot more than I thought I would. I'm really happy that I finally found a build that these looked all right on. These are one of those wheel styles that look really good as a wheel, but I've had a difficult time finding a build that they actually fit. And I think the gray and the blue is just fantastic. And I think the little machine dashes work well back here. The gray doesn't clash with the bed. So overall, I'm really happy with these. And then you can see that I ditched the scale hub in favor of just the wheel nut. And it's something on these shallow wheels that just kind of bugs me with the scale hubs when they stick out just a lot. It really accentuates how shallow that wheel is. But when you put a wheel nut on there, they actually appear to be a little more deep dish than they are. So it's kind of a little trick of the eye. But let's go ahead and check these clearances here. So it looks like we are just missing at full lock. And on the back, you can see here, we're just kissing the shock. So we're definitely touching that shock a little. Got plenty of fender clearance though, at full twist. We're just touching it. And I think the same on the front. But the rear is the big difference here on the bed. Like we're almost touching it as is. You can see how far these sit in. So on a twist, we're just clear of that fender. So you can see why I had to downsize the tire diameter so much because of these wheels. But I'm digging this narrow offset here. I think it's a good stance. Definitely changes the look up. Be able to run some narrower lines for sure. But overall, super happy with the wildcards, even though they were a wildcard to the wildcards I had planned. But overall, I think it's a great look. These are more of the going out at night on the town, I would say, more flashy wheels of the three. But overall, I think it's three good choices, three wildly different setups and wildly different looks for this truck. So I think that's a success. Lights are in, as you saw, so we are ready for a quick little overdrive test here. Just make sure everything is nice and smooth. So let's check this out. Nice and slow, nice and quiet. Speed this guy up just a hair. So that's 1, 2, 3. Looks like 4 rotations will bring us back to basically centered up there. Full lock. Everything seems to check out, so you know what that means. Time for a little tabletop test. But before we do that, let's take a look at these LED lights. All right, you can kind of see those ice blue lights reflecting there on the table. So just a nice little hint of blue. Almost looks like an HID bulb in reality, but I think that works well with the body color choice. Let's go ahead and creep up this little edge. No problem there. These tires are just super gummy. Really liking these Baja MTZs. We'll just hold on to the edge there. Very nice. But overall, I think this ice blue is a great match for a blue body color. So it's not too much, but it's just enough. So I think with that, we are ready for more of an official tabletop test. Lights off. Wheels and tires have been swapped out, so I think we are ready for a little articulation test here. We'll run through these ramps, see if we can't get this thing twisted up, get a nice close look at it. But man, I'm just digging these deep dish wheels, and that matte silver looks so good against the blue. We'll just have to pause right there for a second. That looks so good. But man, we still got all 4 tires touching the ground, so not much of a challenge so far. We'll see if this next ramp can get us flexed out just a little bit more. The next ramp. Let's see if this will be any more of a challenge. So it looks like we're going to get that third wheel there, that back tire off the ground. Just a hair and back down. But that is plenty good articulation, I would say. Let's drop this over the side. And definitely some nice slow control with this ESC and motor. And those oil shocks don't hurt either. Let me line this back up. Okay, not sure it'll be any more of a challenge in this direction, but we'll give it a go. Got a little tire squish there. Get up on this ramp. Nice bit of flex. I'll line up this rear tire. So if we can't get that up on the ramp. Nice little twist. That creep, just such good control. I'm just gonna get it a little slower. Oh, there we go. Just a little bit. This thing is just so impressive. Sorry, there's no narration. I'm just enjoying watching it flex. Oh my gosh. Just can't get enough of this thing. I think we've come to the end of the tabletop testing portion. And I know there weren't any insane climbs, but that's not really the focus of this. It's really just to make sure everything is functioning as intended, moving freely, there's no binding. And in that regards, I think this is a success. And it's also just to have a little fun on the tabletop after you finish the build. And I think that's a success as well, because I'm having a lot of fun. Definitely enjoying this little ESC and motor. Just super torquey. Lots of just low end control here. Look at that creep. I mean, just slow it on down. But could not be happier with that. And of course, this thing just looks killer. So I think now there's really only one vital piece of the build left unknown. And that, of course, is where we came out on the weights. So I think we're going to get this guy on the scales with all three versions of the wheels and tires and see what our weight and bias is. Here we are at the end of yet another build, and I've got to say I am super excited about this one. Very happy with it. Let's start with just the look of it here. I think I hit the nail on the head with the Aussie work truck theme. Very happy with that aluminum bed. Really pops the color of that cab, and you can't beat the white roof and white grille against the blue. I mean, that's just classic FJ right there. So just super happy with that look. And then speaking of looks, I think all three wheel tire sets really work with this well. Gives it different tread patterns, different tire diameters, different track widths. So a lot of versatility as far as setup on running this guy. So I think right there, that's a win. And then as far as performance, I think definitely we hit the nail on the head as far as turning this stock rail into an LCG chassis setup here. So you definitely don't have to spend a ton of money on a custom chassis to get yourself a nice low slung, low LCG rig setup. And then I guess the last thing is this nice little mini Komodo. Just very excited to finally get that fit in a build. I've actually ordered another one since I've been working on this one. So gonna have one of these in another build later on, but very impressed out of the gate with that motor. And it pairs great, of course, with Furitek ESC. So excited to actually get that out and give it a little bit more of a test. But I think for now, that's probably gonna wrap this build episode up. And as always, I hope you learned something on the journey. I know I did. This was a fun one. They all are, but they all seem to have some unique challenges and definitely some learning experiences. So thank you for coming along on the build journey with me. I know this is a long one, but sometimes that's how they go, to squeeze in all the info. But anyways, I want to say thanks for coming along. I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, thanks for watching.